Pretty sure.
Okay, yeah, I think it has. So sorry, where were we?
Oh no, I was just saying my daughter's supposed to be starting school a week on Monday, which I wasn't like overly kind of up for sending her to school. But then we've moved to this tiny little village, so it's a tiny school, small amount of kids, kind of like a local vibe. So I thought to myself, that will be safer than a big, massive, huge state school. And she wants to go. She's 4, and like her cousins go to school and they love it, and so she wants to go. So yeah, she starts on
Would
a
you
week
ever
Monday.
consider homeschooling? Is that?
Well, that's what I thought we were going to do, to be honest, because my wife's a teacher, a primary school teacher, and my brother's wife's a primary school teacher. So actually, I've got 2 daughters, he's got 2 sons and 2 teachers. So that that's something that we could think about doing. But Elora wanted to go to school, and so we have to go for it. And I just hope first couple of years they just let them be them and whatever, and there isn't the propaganda. Although
I think it's as bad as in British schools now. It is actually, because
it is pretty bad. Yeah, it is pretty bad. Yeah,
because I was speaking to my sister the other day, who goes to the oldest school in England, and you'd think that they'd be very traditional, but they've got rid of a lot of classic literature because there's not enough representation. Or actually, her matron told her, or was it her English teacher, told her that they're not going to read English classics because they were written by white patriarchy. It's just polluting the minds of the youth.
Yeah. So what do we read now then?
Because you can't I think they're reading a lot of modern authors, which just aren't as good, just because they don't even talk about accurate history. So I don't know. They've compromised on everything to make the syllabus more diverse, which is honestly just such a shame, because I believe classic literature can teach a person to have the most important eternal moral, ethical values. And today, I think the youth strongly depend on the internet, and they depend on social media for their opinions and views of reality, which can sometimes, I think, contain a lot of content that just promotes ruthlessness, and violence and greed, and just promoting everything that satisfies the human ego, and having to constantly be stimulated by all our senses. Children can't even speak these days, Gareth. Like, they're not eloquent anymore.
No, I know exactly what you mean. On a tablet 24/7. But I think also, by taking away the old literature, and therefore, taking away an access to history, then you've got no barometer to judge. So you're not going to learn from the past. I mean, I think now, it's even when I was in school, like, they would teach you about Hitler and the Nazis like as much as you wanted, but they never covered communism. They didn't cover communist Soviet Union, or communist China, Vietnam, Cambodia. We were never taught about that sort of stuff. So it's almost like you don't have that sort of thing in the back of your mind that when you witness something happening now, where we're falling into communism, where you actually go, hang on, I learned about that, and that's exactly what they did there. Hang on, like, you don't have that because you never learned that. And I wonder, if kids don't have that sort of, and also, even if men were, the way they were back then, that's just how it was. And so that's how it was. Even when I was a kid, people used to refer to corner shops in, quite a derogatory way. They don't do it now, generally. I mean, some people do, but they don't generally do it now. But that's how it was. I mean, so what do you want to do? Do you want to go back and, arrest the guy that used to live across the road from me because he used to say stuff in like 1985? I mean, or you just go, society's evolved from that, and so people don't talk about that anymore.
And I think you're so right about that. I think classical literature even teaches us so much about history, more than I would say a lot of academic history books do. Like, if you want to learn about the Russian-French War of 1812, just read War and Peace, by Tolstoy, which is an epitome of world literature, instead of reading like a straightforward historical chronicle, which only gives you one narrative. So I just don't feel that I get that depth of evolution in the human condition when I watch and read modern stories like The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. Like, I don't know, modern literature cannot parallel the work of authors like Charles Dickens, Jane Austen. there's so many to name, but my goodness, their stories taught me so much history, morality, societal ethics, and just the consequences of dishonesty and what it truly means to struggle.
Yeah. And also, like, I think now in terms of school, you know, these kids, they're not even reading textbooks, they're going on Wikipedia. So if you say, you know, can you tell me, you know, I don't know, about the War of Independence, they're not going to read a book on the War of Independence. They're going to just type into Google War of Independence, what's the first thing? Wiki, bang, right, I'll cut and paste a few of those paragraphs, stick them in. And you know, I've seen firsthand how Wikipedia is massively manipulated.
Okay, so moving on from this topic, I do want to know your opinion on, I'm sure you know what's happening with the Dutch government with, you know, they're trying to reduce nitrogen in the country. So they want to reduce pig farming, for example, and, you know, dairy and vegetable farming. And these things are massive in Holland. So all of these farmers are essentially going to be so pressured to make these changes that, you know, and it's all part of this new world order. And all of this is being done under the guise of a fake nitrogen crisis. And the Dutch government, honestly, can't even afford to lower income tax because apparently it will cost about 4 billion. Yet they're here spending like 25 billion on a made up nitrogen crisis, and they're spending 17 million on immigration. So it just doesn't make sense. Like nothing makes sense anymore. But farmers in the Netherlands are protesting on such a large scale, like it's unheard of. And they're furious about their government proposal. And, you know, it's putting a lot of them out of business. And Dutch farmers argue that governments aren't really, how do I put this? Like, they're not really, it's all obviously done under this fake crisis that they've manufactured, which there actually is no proof of. But the farmers are protesting under the slogan of no farmers, no food, and the dangers of giving up domestic food supply. But, you know, how do you see this crisis unfolding?
Well, that's the idea, because if you control the food, you control the people. Simple as that. True. So they want complete control over food supply. So manufactured food shortages are a fantastic way of doing that. You know, they want to. There is a depopulation agenda. I don't think they got these jabs into as many people as they would have liked. So then you go to Plan B, and you know, if I'm going to sell something to you, if I'm going to get you to do something, I need to make you believe that it's in your best interest, or at least make the public believe it's in the best interest. So they're not going to come out and say, right, what we're going to do, we're going to destroy all these farms, so the food supply becomes squeezed and you're all desperate and ruined. I don't think many people are going to vote for that, really. So then climate change. If you don't do this, you're going to die, and your grandchildren are going to die. And you show all this emotive nonsense, dying polar bears and all provable nonsense, to get the public to be almost apathetic towards a farmer. Why do I care about your farm, mate? This is the future of the planet we're talking about. Right. You know, that's the how they want people to be. And then, you know, it's the same here with the energy prices. You know, the British Ofgem is supposed to regulate the energy sector, but Ofgem is actually regulated themselves by the parliamentary ombudsman. So actually the government is above them. Now, I hear it all the time on the, you know, they don't know what they're going to do when the price cap goes up. I've got an idea. Don't put it up. That's an idea. That's an idea. I mean, these energy companies are making 7, 8, 9 billion in a 6-month period profit. Now, the idea that if you went, right, we're not putting the cap up, we're not doing that, they'd still be making 7 odd billion. So what? So E.ON and EDF, are they going to bugger off? Are they going to go, no, we're not going to supply England anymore? Of course they're not. They're making billions anyway, you know. And so you could quite easily control that cap, but they don't, because they don't want to, because they're not meant to. Because what you do is you destroy people completely, get people to a point of absolute dependency on the state. Because I've seen a couple of things last couple of days where the government are going to do little crumbs. They're going to throw some crumbs to people. You know, bear in mind, they're saying that your monthly, I mean, my monthly bills were about 68 quid a month. Now they're 200. They're supposed to go up to 400 in October. Well, I'm not paying that. That's not happening. But if your breadline is 68 quid or whatever a month, and it goes to 200, and then it goes to 400, like, you can't pay that. And so they're saying, oh, the government's going to give out a one-off payment of 250 quid. Well, what's that going to do? It's less, that's a round of drinks compared to what you're losing. Like, you know, And so people are going to make a choice, you know, to basically not heat their homes. And God knows what that's going to do in terms of people's
health. At what point
health.
do people actually retaliate?
Well, that's the point. And it, you know, it makes me feel like maybe that's what they want. You know, they want civil unrest. They want an excuse to bring the army on the streets. But also, you know, in these government help schemes, so-called help schemes, they only give money to people that have less than £1,000 in the bank. So what they want then is, obviously, they're after people's savings, because they know people are going to go into their savings to pay these energy prices and stuff, to heat their families and whatever. So in the end, you're going to have a population where work's gone to shit because energy prices going up in your house and my house. Well, they're going up in the restaurants, they're going up in the pubs, they're going up in the shops. So these places are going to cease to exist. So all of a sudden, no one's got anywhere to work. So you've got a population that doesn't have any savings, doesn't have any money. It's got a mortgage it can't pay. It's got debts it can't pay. And then, so you're desperate. You're absolutely desperate. So then what does the government do? The government comes in with, well, we could bail you out with X, Y, and Z. And I honestly think that the bailout will be to almost nationalize everything. So coming out of the World Economic Forum, you've got private home ownership shouldn't exist. Private car ownership shouldn't exist. So I believe that's what they'll do. I believe the state will, because if I said to you, do you know what? I'm going to take your house off you. And you can live in it, but it's not yours anymore. So you just need to sign over the deeds to me. You'd probably tell me to piss off.
Right.
But if you're thousands and thousands of pounds in debt, you can't pay your mortgage, bailiffs are going to come around and kick you out into the street where you and your family are going to be cold. And I go, do you know what? Don't worry. Stay in your house. Just sign the deeds over to me and I'll wipe out the debt. The state will own the house, but you can still live in it. At that point, you'd probably go, okay, well, yeah, all right, because then at least I'm in my house. And it's like, okay, so then there comes, you will own nothing, but you'll be happy. So that, for me, that's what that slogan means. But then further down the line, I'll put you on your universal basic income, which will be sod all. But you only get that if you tick your compliance, if your social credit score is good enough, if all your jabs are up to date, if all your kids' jabs are up to date.
Right, we're going to be living in the CCP world very soon.
That's exactly what they want. It's exactly what they want. There's no mistake.
You're so right. Like, it really is an increasing dependence on the state, and it's like a foreboding introduction to socialism. And all these climate change believers already have very liberal socialist values and beliefs, and they believe that we should have, you know, the government owes them a living. And after saving the planet, they're most interested in bigger government, universal healthcare, God knows what else. But it's really interesting because I was looking at some data for climate change, and apparently the IPCC, which stands for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, they did their sixth assessment report last year. And this is done, I think, by the UN, by the way, so anyone can go Google it. But basically, they say that there's been a misrepresentation or a miscalculation of global warming by 20%.
It's a pretty big percentage.
And the fact that, you know, they actually highlighted two miscalculations, and one of them was of global warming, and which is absolutely negligible. And the second was a miscalculation of anthropogenic global warming, which means how much human activity is affecting it. And I think the likely range of global surface temperatures from 2010 to 2019 was about 0.8 degrees to about 1.3 degrees Celsius. But even that is only because they compared this period to the industrial period. But yet, you know, the global warming deception continues. I don't obviously think this data has made its way to mainstream television, but how long do you think they're going to perpetuate this lie?
As long as they can. The same as they did with COVID, to be fair. They pushed that lie until the public wasn't having it anymore. Some countries are still buying it, but
climate change lockdowns anytime soon?
I think they're going to struggle with that now, you know, for two reasons. One, they're trying to tell us that the climate's got worse over the last couple of years. Well, there were lockdowns over the last couple of years, so that doesn't work then. And also the fact that I think because of they've had a large uptick in deaths in the UK, which are down to something else, but they needed to give some form of admission. They've blamed that on lockdowns. So they're admitting now that lockdowns killed a lot of people, in which case you're kind of going to struggle, I think, to push for it again. But, you know, the the surface temperature thing is an interesting scam as well. Like, I looked into this. I was having a conversation with my friend Som, and he pointed this out to me, and I hadn't even noticed it before. But obviously, urbanization plays a huge part in ground temperature, because a field won't heat up as much as a street. That's just how it works. So that plays a role. The fact that asphalt stores around about 91% of the sun's radiation, and then just disperses that throughout the day, heating the surrounding air, including through the night. So therefore, that's another reason why you're getting higher temperatures in the evenings when the sun's not necessarily shining. And so then I looked into, I was like, well, that makes sense actually, because Heathrow Airport is always one of the highest. Like that makes sense. Of course, it's freaking kilometers and kilometers of asphalt. So then I looked into the three, when it broke the record 3 times in one day, apparently. And so I looked at it and I was like, okay, so first of all, there was this little village in Sussex, I think it was Sussex, or was it Surrey? It might have been Surrey. Anyway, that broke the record. It was the first one to break the record. And I thought, a tiny village, well, that don't make much sense then. So in terms of that theory of urbanization, it's just a little village. And then I look, and no, that village is Gatwick Airport. And so that's where the weather station is. So you've got about 90,000 square meters of asphalt there, right? Wow. So then it was Heathrow, which I think is like 12.5 square kilometers of asphalt. And then the third one that broke the record was Coningsby, again, another village up in Lincolnshire. So again, I thought, well, all right, again, it's a village. It's up north, even further north. It's an RAF base. And so again, the weather station is on an RAF base, which is kilometers of asphalt. And you're just like, they don't, these are little things that they omit when they report it. And so people go, oh my God, that's crazy. And you're like, well, hang on a minute. Let's have a look at why this is. Why would they put a weather station? Why are these weather stations all put on massive, why don't you put one in a field and tell me what the temperature is? Oh, because it wouldn't get near it. All right. That's the reason then.
That's so interesting. I think, what are your thoughts on solar paneling and electric cars?
I think electric cars are a complete joke. I think they're massively dangerous. I mean, you see the amount of times these things catch on fire. It's insane. Also,
is that why the insurance apparently is going to be much higher for electric cars, I think?
Wouldn't surprise me if that's the reason. And also, what it does to the environment and the slave labor required to get the cobalt and all these things for these batteries.
Lithium batteries, right?
Yeah, if it was about the environment and about this whole kind of virtue signaling, saving the world and equality and what have you, then no one would be driving an electric car. I think the idea of electric cars is further down the line of driverless cars, where you go where you're told you can go, and computer says no if you want to go elsewhere. And in terms of solar paneling, from what I'm seeing, because I looked into it, because it used to be relatively affordable, like solar panels. It wasn't crazy, and I thought to myself, like, we've got a south-facing garden. If it's not, if it's not too much crazy money, I might look into sort of having a couple of panels, just to try and bring some costs down or whatever. Now the prices are astronomical, of course, but the more that you look into it now, I don't know whether this is to do with cloud seeding and stuff like that. Certainly what was being suggested, that actually solar panels don't get the power that they used to get, which makes zero sense, because we're supposed to have more sun now, but they don't actually deliver the same amount of power. So that's something for maybe your viewers to kind of verify and have a look into that, and whether that's the case. But from what I read, they don't do what they used to do.
It's interesting, because I've also heard that they might potentially start taxing users of electric cars, because they won't be using petrol anymore. It's just, there's so many loopholes for people to wake up, honestly. But some people,
they changed their minds as well. So like I think it was less than 10 years ago, they were telling everyone to drive diesel cars. The diesel cars were better for the environment than petrol cars, that diesel was more sustainable, X, Y, and Z, all this nonsense. So everyone went out and bought diesel cars. I've bought a diesel car, not because I was told to buy one. It was one I found that I liked, and it was cheap. But then they all of a sudden, after everyone had gone out and bought their diesel cars is they just flipped it and went, oh no, diesel cars are the worst, so we're actually going to put the tax up on them.
Oh, wow.
And it's like, okay, can I get some money back then? No, sorry, too late, son. You believed your government, serves you right. You know, and so
true.
they'll change their mind, I'm sure.
It's like when they changed their mind from naming it global warming to climate change, because they did in fact realize that, I mean, the earth is going to warm up, whatever you do. So they call it climate change. So now even when they're wrong, they're right. It's just,
just rebadge it.
pathetic.
Just rebadge it. Yeah, it's insane.
And, so now that obviously Boris Johnson has announced his resignation from Prime Minister several weeks ago, the race for the new Prime Minister has begun. And it's quite obvious to us, at least, that we're fighting a chaotic form of globalism at this point here in the West. But both of them have now admitted that they want to use a central bank digital currency. And it's all part of the World Economic Forum's greater agenda. And like you said, Klaus Schwab literally said that, you know, you will own nothing and you will be happy. And Rishi Sunak is honestly, Gareth, already so wealthy. How is it that people aren't aware that as a public figure with a government salary, you can't be a multimillionaire? So
I mean, his is slightly more transparent in the sense that, you know, he worked for Goldman Sachs, where he made money, and then he headed up a lot of different hedge funds that were based in the Cayman Islands. I mean, that stuff's, you know, kind of quite easy to find out. In terms of one of them, which was the Children's something trust, will come to me in a second. He was crucial in where he basically made tens of millions out of that particular kind of trying to think of the word for it, but basically what it did, it was key in basically kickstarting the 2009 financial crisis. So you've got a guy who's made tens of millions out of something that triggered the crisis that destroyed people. He now wants to be in charge. He's worth about 200 odd million, I think his wife's worth billions, isn't she? Yeah. But the one that got me more, to be fair, was Liz Truss, because she worked at Shell, one job, worked at Shell for a couple of years. Then she was part of a think tank called Reform. And then she was a politician. So she went straight into politics quite young. I think she was about 33, 34, something like that. And so she's been on 90 grand a year. That's including expenses, 90 grand a year since then. And she's worth 8.4 million. Now, that's about 92 years worth of 90 grand a year. It doesn't make any sense. How are you worth that money? Because, like I say, you know, she went to uni till her mid-20s. She went into Shell. I'm guessing she's not going to be on millions a year at Shell. And then she's part of a think tank and then a politician. So, you know, as much as I don't like Sunak, at least, you know, you can see the money trail, the paper trail with him a bit more. Whereas with her, I don't know where that money's come from.
I mean, she is currently the favorite to win the Conservative leadership battle. She's already scooping up as many cabinet endorsements as she possibly can. And she is beating Rishi Sunak in the polls. But I think that's also forced Rishi to go back and backpedal on his stance on taxation. So I don't know. I just think that these two people are cut from the same cloth. They were groomed in the World Economic Forum to become these future leaders. And we the people are again given this illusion of choice. But both their goals really is to take away all our rights and our right to property, to self-determination, and I think, you know, we'd ultimately be moving towards a very communist style government.
Yeah, I think they're here to do a couple of years of destruction, whichever one wins, because I think they want a Labour government next. Because if you imagine what, I mean, I don't like any party, but if you imagine what Labour would have done in the last 2 years, they would have locked down harder. They would have made things mandatory. They would have gone to next levels, and that coupled with, you know, women having penises and all the other nonsense that they push, they blatantly want them in charge. I think
that's so true. I think we'd definitely see a lot more even LGBT propaganda if Labour was in charge.
100%.
Yeah. Gareth, I really wanted to ask you, have you heard about viral sensation Andrew Tate in the past couple of days at all?
I've heard his name. not sure what that's about though.
He's basically a 4-time kickboxing world champion. He came out of nowhere and just went absolutely viral on TikTok, which is funny because he doesn't even have a TikTok account. So there's essentially around 12 to 15,000 TikTok accounts posting these clips from his podcast that he did years ago. And in these clips, he talks mostly about politics, government, and just our current social paradigm and just the decline of Western civilization, which 90% of what he says is just absolute fact. And then the 10% of what he talks about is about women and just these interpersonal relationships between the two genders. And everything he says, again, is just the truth. But people have, all these feminists and LGBTQ people have labeled him a toxic, violent misogynist because he talks about traditional gender roles. And he talks about how women, well, no, he says women are men's property, but not in that sense. Like since the dawn of time, men have been the providers, just the protectors of women. And they cut out very sensationalist, like 6 seconds of his long form videos just to make it go viral. And it's just really funny because he's been completely banned from Instagram, which was the only platform that he actually really had. And this guy, I think, has really helped a lot of the youth, like the boys who are becoming men. And it's just really crazy to me that they were able to ban someone like him. I mean, it's actually not that crazy after they banned Trump, but it's really interesting, the ideological causes of leftism in men. And I think it really is because we're living through a paradigm of the lowest testosterone levels. It's declining worldwide, but
yeah, not by accident as well.
Yeah,
not by accident. I'll look into that because I hadn't. I'd heard his name the other day, and that would be why then, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's just crazy because people think that he's bringing back masculinity because of his misogynist way of looking at women, but it really is because he's teaching men to stand up. And men, I think, for the longest time have had enough of feminists attacking every trait that is intrinsically masculine. And it's just, I think it's a reaction to the cause of decades of abuse by these feminist blue-haired women.
Well, I think Jordan Peterson was a similar thing, wasn't it? He kind of came out and with the 12 rules for life, and all of a sudden it was dangerous that he was telling men to better themselves or how to be. People have this whole attitude that men rule the world and all this sort of stuff, and what they're talking about is a handful of billionaire men.
1%.
Yeah, that's not me or the guy across the road, and actually, white working class boys in this country are the lowest of the low. They have the lowest school grades, the lowest career expectancies out of any demographic, but you can't do anything to help them because they're the oppressors. It's very, very strange. Very, very strange.
Would you agree that the phrase toxic masculinity is kind of actually an oxymoron? Because one thing refutes the other. Like masculinity by definition cannot be toxic. Like it's like saying toxic femininity. Femininity isn't toxic. And just like masculinity is actually a social virtue. Like in times of, like masculine men are the ones who actually rescue those in distress. They use their strength to help people. Like we saw it on 9/11, even during the Houston floods, and those who ran towards the bullets in Las Vegas, these were masculine men who do these things. And it's just,
but that's why there's a war on it though, because that's not what they want. They don't want people that will stand up and fight. They want people that will sit and cry and ask for a safe space because Hillary lost. That's what they want. So they were always going to have a war on masculinity because masculinity isn't a man thing either. Like that masculine part of women is what says I'm not having it.
Yeah.
But that's not a character trait they want from any of us. They want us to have everything they offer.
Yeah, they just want us pacified and weak. And it seems like we've arrived at a point in evolutionary development where men just have to reject their most manlier instincts in favor of more feminine traits, like the feminization of all things masculine, is taking, I think it's really just taking place just as women are being encouraged to do the exact opposite. And it's really hard for someone my age because all my friends are feminists. And even some of the friends that are guys that I have are actually feminists. And they've been brainwashed to think that they should be championing feminism. So it really is hard.
Yeah, and also feminism isn't what feminism was. Feminism in its beginning was I mean, well, one, it was funded by obviously Rockefeller and stuff, but in terms of most people's attitude towards towards feminism, it was about equality, and that's what it's about, and that's how it should be, of course. But now it feels like it's about revenge. But most of the young women now that want revenge were never actually the ones that were oppressed in the first place. And you kind of find that a lot with almost some of the reparation stuff. It's like, well, hang on, wait, what do you mean? You want me to apologize for something my great granddad might or might not have done to your great granddad that didn't affect you? I mean, come on, mate. I mean, at what point do you just go, we're getting on, aren't we?
I agree that the original philosophy of the feminist movement was virtuous, but I think, people like Gloria Steinem were positioned to lead this movement on purpose. And I just think that, it's really been radicalized at this point in this 21st century, especially in the West. There's no need for feminism. Like, women are actually above the law more so than men are in every regard. And I think one of the deeper reasons for why they wanted to champion feminism now, I think, is to deconstruct the family unit. Actually, this was second wave feminism, so that, the deep state could increase the tax-paying population.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it was, of having two people working in a household. And that also then means that you can tax both, but you can also, the state has more control of the children.
Right, exactly. And it's just really sad that, like, the fact that the modern day woman thinks that the new age alpha male has to show emotion and talk about their feelings. And it's just, I just don't agree that men have to be portrayed as these strong masculine figures, and that somehow negates their weakness. It's just, I get so much hate for just talking about the clear biological distinction between a man and a woman. It's like there's no such thing as objective reality anymore. It's quite scary.
Yeah. And also, I don't understand why men and women have to be the same. They're not the same. And that's fine. That's cool. Because, for me as a man, I don't want to date or marry myself. That's weird. So, the fact that there are differences between men and women is great. I love that, the fact that we're not the same. But for some reason, it almost feels like the goal is to make everyone the same.
True. It's just collectivism.
Yeah, because also it's the same with culture. You flood lots of different cultures into one place. What you end up with is actually in the end no culture at all. True. Because all of them end up getting diluted into nothing, really.
That's exactly why they want so much diversity.
Yeah, because with so much of it, you don't end up with anything.
Yeah.
In the end,
and you can't identify a common enemy because we're all each other's enemy at that point.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't, it doesn't work as an idea. The fact that you go to Italy and there's an Italian culture, you go to France, there's a French culture, and that's what makes life great. Whereas now, you dilute so much that actually no country has any culture. Nothing is. It's just nothingness. Everyone's vanilla.
Right. And it's like, it's just a culture of standing for everything. And if you're standing for everything, at the end of the day, you're not actually standing for anything. So I just really do believe that women have now not only come so far with women's rights, but they have actually surpassed their male counterparts in the economic and social sphere in every regard. Like, the statistics are everywhere. And I just find this constant narrative and this pushback from Western neo-feminists quite abhorrent. And all the arguments that I hear in defense of feminism are just, they come from the same perennial, ceaseless defensive angst of the stereotypical feminist playbook. So I don't know. Do you think that it will backfire at some point? Because at the end of the day, Gareth, they also want this friction between the two genders, because their whole agenda is depopulation. And that's why even LGBTQ stuff, it's all to actually depopulate the planet.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. They don't want people having kids, and, you know, sperm counts are just plummeting completely, to the point where I think they're saying that basically, you know, in the West, you're basically going to be infertile within like 20 years or something. If it carries on its current trajectory, it might not even be 20 years. It's mad. So you can just see it, you know, you can just see it through lots of different ways. Obviously, diet is one of them, the nonsense that they put in food, the radiation that we're surrounded with now. You know, there's multiple ways that they can affect sperm counts and stuff, and fertility.
Even beer is quite heavy in estrogen, isn't it?
Yeah, so yeah, that might be a problem, but yeah, no, apparently, yeah, IPAs, isn't it? It's which is my favorite actually. But I've got 2 kids now, so I'm all right. I'm obviously not drinking enough. But yeah, no, there is obviously a goal to depopulate. You know, less people are easier to control.
Yeah,
that's for sure. But I think people will come together, and I think they already are. I am optimistic.
Yeah, I think that was my last question. I think I'm just quite curious to know what your predictions are for the next decade or so. Do you think we're heading into, you know, a lot of people call it the golden age, or 1,000 years of peace and prosperity? Or do you think we're actually just on a downhill path towards a dystopian nightmare?
I think we're on a downward path into a dystopian nightmare that will wake up enough people to, because you know, at the end of the day, once you've got the numbers, then it's over and it ends in a day.
Yeah.
You know, if March 2020, every single businessman, or not even every single businessman or woman, but every single, like, not even that, 70%, or even 50% actually, just went, no, we're not looking down. I'm not closing my business. What are you on about? It's how I feed my family. Get lost. Then it would have never happened. It would have never happened. But instead, people just, you know, plodded along and followed the leader. But, you know, I think in the end, more and more people woke up as a result of that. And so the worse it gets, unfortunately, it kind of takes that sometimes, I think, to wake enough people up. You know, you have these memes, don't you, of like, you know, cows walking towards the abattoir, and this guy's going, mate, you know, and they're all going, oh, shut up, conspiracy theorist. But in the end, you know, that cow gets closer enough to the abattoir that actually it can see the one in front getting, you know, its throat slit, and actually then, oh, hang on a minute, then, you know, that point, the fact that it took that long to get there is sad. But in the end, you know, I think that in the end will wake up enough people. And also the other thing, which I think is key, is the more you destroy people, so the less people have to lose, then
right. And that's a dangerous man, someone who has nothing.
Dangerous man. I would never want to fight someone who had nothing left to lose, ever. It's the worst one to fight. And you think about it as a football analogy, like, you know, if I'm 1-0 down and it's the 70th minute, if I'm playing in goal, I'm not coming up for a corner to try and score an equaliser and head it in. I'm not doing that. I'm not taking that risk, because, well, what if I give the ball away and they go down the end and score and I'm 2-0 down? That's my fault. I'm not doing that. But then you roll forward to the 94th minute when you are getting right to the end. We're right at the wire now. This is the end, guys. We're against the wall. Hell yeah, I'm going up for that corner. And so is every other goalie around. You know, yeah, of course we are. And that, I think, is what will happen.
That is a great analogy.
People will go, yeah, do you know what? I'm going up for the corner.
Yes. Gosh, I can't wait for it. I think we're definitely seeing it, more and more waves of people growing up, waking up, growing up. I meant waking up. But Gareth, I want to thank you enormously for coming on my show. I think what you're doing is so imperative in today's political climate, and, you know, where the masses are just inundated with only one narrative. It's so important that we ask questions and allow this public discourse. So I really appreciate you coming today and giving me your time. It was such a pleasure. And thank you so much.
No, thank you for having me. I'm sorry it took me so long to finally sort my life out. I was faffing about. It was a bit of a perfect storm, actually, of things getting in the way, but it was worth the wait for me. But I'm sorry about that.
It's better late than never. So yeah. Thank you so much.
Magic. Take care.